Okay. So, all right. Well, welcome to what are we on? Week 11. Week 11. So we only have 5 more weeks. So the topic this week, as you can see, is food and biodiversity. Um, but this first part, I'm going to go over a review of last week, which was natural resource management. There was a lot there. So um, hopefully, all of it sort of made sense. We started with the reuse, recycle, and the concept of zero waste. Remember, with the reduce, reuse, recycle, which is one of the most common things people think of when they think of sustainability, at least in my experience. Remember that that's not just like a saying that you should do those things, although that's sort of what it is. Remember, it's actually um, a hierarchical statement, meaning your top priority in order to minimize your waste is to reduce, which means don't use it in the first place. Reuse is the second priority. So that's like if you already have something, just reuse it for another purpose. There's a lot of ways you can do that, and there's all kinds of stuff there, upcycling, and so forth. And then recycling, which is what a lot of people think of as like, I would say the top priority, is actually the third most important thing to do. Okay, so remember the best way to minimize your waste is to not create the waste in the first place. And if you remember, one of the key points is that even if you reuse or recycle something, so you have a product, and remember that there's a lot of waste upstream from like the manufacturing the product, extracting of raw materials, whatever the case may be. Okay, so that one website said there's 87 times the waste that you see on the at the end of its life, but you could those numbers aren't set in stone. But the point is that there is a lot of um, natural resource impacts upstream. So that's why just not buying the thing in the first place is the best thing to do. And a lot of this is based on that linear resource flow model, the extract, use, and waste, right? And so that's linear. It's sort of cradle to grave, right? So you start with something and then you just throw it away. And it's important to point out there is no such thing as away. It all goes somewhere. A lot of it goes into a landfill, which builds up, and there's a lot of issues associated with that. So that's a linear model. And remember, for zero waste, we need to get into a circular model, right? So when you have the extraction, the use, instead of throwing it away, um, you want to put those resources, loop them back into that resource flow at some point. I mean, it could be, extract them, pull them apart, put in the raw materials, or it could be use that thing and sort of like reuse it for another purpose. That is a part of your circular resource flow. Okay. And so there are municipalities, colleges, and so forth that have a zero waste goal. Boulder, Colorado is one of them. They've been doing that or pursuing that for the last, I'd say, 10 or 15 years. So we'll talk about that when we actually go to Colorado, which will be great. And we'll see some of their zero waste initiatives on their campus. Um, okay. And then we looked at the Marine Stewardship Council, the Forest Stewardship Council, and aquaponics. Remember, these are third-party certifiers. It's really helpful if we have to buy things, right? Like we need to eat food and we need to, live our lives. I mean, we use resources. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So if you are going to purchase something, it's nice to know that it's at least sustainable or more sustainable, depending on sort of who you ask. And so that's the intent of the FSC and the MSC. It's a really easy way for consumers to say, okay, I see the FSC logo. I know that, indigenous rights were respected. The forest was managed sustainably, and so forth. Okay. And so it's there to help you make a decision because I mean, there's so much information out there. It's really hard to know, what's good, what's not, what's in between. So these labels can help you make that decision more quickly. Remember the Marine Stewardship Council, again, is very similar to the Forest Stewardship Council. It's a third party. They don't work for anybody, and they look at the whole lifespan of the marine product, in this case, fish and any kind of seafood, and they make sure that it's managed sustainably. It's not overfished. The fishing methods are not very damaging to the environment. And so it's nice to be able to see that label. Remember, we looked um, at the Monterey Bay aquarium has a really great seafood guide. So if you like to eat seafood, I would definitely suggest checking that website out that I provided. Um, and so it's not just like this sort of crunchy sustainability thing. It's like, oh, we need to save the fish. I mean, okay, that's fine. That's not nothing wrong. I mean, I'm all about saving the fish too, but it's also very practical because if you overfish, then you can have these populations crash. Remember that North Atlantic cod population that crashed and lived like thousands of fishermen and women went out of work, and it was just, it never came back. And so by sustainably managing these areas, where the fish, spend their life. If you don't overfish, then you can make that industry last. Okay, so it is very practical. Same with forestry. And forestry people have known this for a long time. So have a lot, the fisher, like you look at the Maine lobstermen, they've been doing this for over 100 years. So they understand these things. This is not like, news to them. They understand very well that you want to sustain these resources. Then we looked at aquaponics, which is a really nice application of circular resource flow. One of my sort of favorite applications because you can have one in your backyard. You can have one in your living room with a fish tank, or you can scale it up to really large operations. And remember, that's the circular resource where, excuse me, you have fish that create waste in their food, and then you would otherwise sort of like start toxifying their own water. What you do is you sort of run that water um, and allow these bacteria to convert that waste into nutrients for plants, and then you provide the water to plants, which is usually called hydroponics, and then the plants pull out all of those nutrients, and then they clean the water, and then you cycle the water back into the fish tank, and then the loop go on and on and on. You can harvest the fish, or sometimes people just have goldfish, which you don't harvest. But it's a really nice circular resource application, and we should see one of those out in Colorado as well. Then we looked at cradle to cradle design. That's another one of these certifications. Third party, they certify products. You can actually find a lot of these products, I mean, in like regular department stores. And so if you go to the Cradle to Cradle website, you can look up products to look for these certifications. And Cradle to Cradle, remember, it has to be everything in the product has to be recyclable, has to be non-toxic. You have to use renewable energy. And so Cradle to Cradle, the intent of that, and hopefully you watched the video, but the intent of the Cradle to Cradle certification is to completely rethink how we design products. And remember, they had talked about the difference between less bad and 100% good. And less bad is sort of, I use recycling as an example. It's a really, really good example of this. So you recycle, it's good. I mean, it's less bad, right? Like you're saving resources, you're reducing energy use, all that sort of thing. But recycling is not going to solve a problem. Or at least the recycling system as it currently stands, because it's all incumbent on the consumer to recycle. And these products are not really designed to be fully recycled. If you dig into this, I'll try to share a video or an article about this, but you really dig into this, the whole recycling industry was really started by chemical companies, actually DuPont in Delaware, who wanted to find, like, they were actually, people were starting to not buy plastics. And it was like this whole thing in the 1980s where it's like, don't buy plastic, don't buy plastic. And DuPont, who makes plastics, was kind of freaking out. So they were tasked with finding a way to sort of like prevent the demise of that part of their business. And they came up with this recycling system. So it's sort of sad, but we kind of got tricked into the whole thing. And if you think about it, everything is on the consumer to recycle. It's not the producer, the designer, the manufacturer has no responsibility whatsoever once they sell the product. And with the cradle to cradle design system, they're actually putting it on the manufacturer to design the products in a way that they're designed to be fully reintegrated back into the resource flow. Okay, so it's a really advanced certification, and it's a really good idea. So, I do suggest you look for some of those products. Um, and this is designed to be a circular resource flow. I remember the one interesting thing that they pointed out was that we have like nutrients in food, right? And we use nutrients our body to grow and to stay healthy and all that sort of thing. And so they look at like the sort of chemical composition of products as technical nutrients. And so you think about like nutrients that can, feed your body. The technical nutrients can be like reintegrated back and to feed the resource flow system. So um, and then we finally looked at the circular economy, which is a concept that has been getting bigger and more recognition in the last, I'd say about 10 years or so. You'll see a lot of this out there if you're paying attention. And there's a lot of different ways to think of the circular economy, but it's, cradle to cradle is a circular economy concept. And the idea is that you won't, things are designed to be reintegrated back into the system. And there's some specific applications that are normally associated with the circular economy, like the idea that you sort of can lease things, right? So you can lease lighting systems, you can lease washing machines, you can lease, I mean, even a car would be part of it. And the idea there is that instead of, having individual ownership of everything, and then it's like, what do you do at the end? You just sort of throw it out in the trash. You are basically using it, you're kind of renting it from the manufacturer, and then whenever it doesn't work anymore, or you want a new one, or you get an upgrade, you give it back to the company, and the idea is that they can reintegrate that back into the system. So circular economy is one of those concepts I really want you to keep your eye out for because it is out there. It is really, really important. And so it's something that you hopefully probably will be mentioned a few times as we move forward and possibly while we travel. Okay, so that's a really important lesson, some very practical stuff in there. Hopefully you enjoyed it and you can sort of apply it to your sustainability thinking as you move forward.